You can share if you would just pull over it. Yeah, pull that over a little bit. Perfect.
I've been
Jay and I have been
I
going
was
back
gonna
and
say
forth, 'cause
there
he keeps giving me the nice chair.
Well, that's nice. I'd take it. He knows it's not forever. So, you know, it's just a modest inconvenience.
We're gonna give you the one that cripples our ledge council.
Oh, I don't know about that one.
Anyway,
That used to be the chair.
welcome back to Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs. It's still the 3rd of May. And we're turning our heads actually to something near and dear to our hearts, which is the rewriting of the apprenticeship program, which the Department of Labor has long wanted to do and is now coming to us with this rewrite. And it is about to pass out of House Commerce. And it is a little late in the game, so we are going to get booted up fast on what this is and why it's so important now and what our path forward is. So we welcome 2 members of the Department of Labor to introduce themselves and walk us through this bill or draft or
Good morning. For the
whatever.
record, Cameron Wood, Policy and Legislative Affairs Director for the Vermont Department of Labor.
And Jay Ramsey, the Director of Workforce Development at the Department of Labor, also wearing the Apprenticeship Director hat today.
Great, we'll take it away.
Okay, so I'm gonna start, just want to give a little bit of context on the record as far as you know, what we're asking for, why this is necessary, etc. And Jay and I have been kind of tag teaming this through on the House side.
And just for committee, we have the bill and Randy and we also have this PowerPoint. You have the bill, PowerPoint, and the apprenticeship standards here.
Right.
So we have, and Keisha, I think you have it all, I hope, online.
So the reason we're bringing this forward is because, I guess let me back up, give me a quick update of what happened this morning. The House Commerce Committee had this short form bill introduced earlier in the session. They took that up off the wall, and we've been working on the language over the past few weeks with that committee. This morning, they reviewed draft 2.1, made very slight edits to the version that they looked at yesterday. They passed this out of their committee earlier this morning. 10-01, I think they were potentially holding it open for the individual who was not present during the vote. This is a priority for the department and for the administration because we are operating in a little bit of a legal gray space, if you will, under the current apprenticeship program and the current statutory language. If you look at what's in Title 21 regarding apprenticeship, it's chapter 13. I think there are 5 sections. It's probably not yet 5 pages. There is really no clear direction of how the department should be administering the program. What are the requirements of an apprenticeship program under Vermont statute? When you look at the language that's there, there are many contradictions. For example, under the Apprenticeship Council, it in one instance lists the commissioner as the chair, and then in a separate section, it statutorily says that they should vote on who should be a chair. So there's a lot of ambiguity and literally contradictions in what's currently there. And so what we as a department are trying to bring forward, and Jay's commented that he was hired as an assistant director, and one of the kind of priority items was to come in and help rewrite the statutory language so we could bring it to you all. The program is a federal state partnership, like many of our programs at the Department of Labor. So, apprenticeship is, although it's administered in Vermont by the state, it is regulated by federal rules and we have to comply with them. In the past, we have come into issue with the U.S. Department of Labor for being out of compliance with the apprenticeship program. And so we're not in that exact state right now, but I think the U.S. Department of Labor does have an expectation that we're moving forward with modernization of this program, beginning with the statutory language. So
And we've made assurances to the feds to that effect.
Yes.
And just while we're on the feds, what is the monetary impact? What did they contribute to our apprenticeship program?
We have two competitive grants right now that will end in June. That's about $1 million. One of the grants is part of the award for that grant is modernizing the system. So taking us out of our COBOL-based registration system and into the federal government system called RAPIDS. Another part of that grant is better aligning the education programs to the registered apprenticeship system, defining what pre-apprenticeship is, defining what youth apprenticeship is, and in our current statute, there are no definitions. And as the population of apprentices that we have the majority of them are in the 16 to 34 age range. So there's a lot of opportunity for us to get some seamless connections to help people line up with registered apprenticeship programs. So I would also say that the federal government, the Office of Apprenticeship, operates apprenticeship programs in other states. Our neighbor, New Hampshire, is called an OA state. The other option for operation is a state apprenticeship agency, which is our current structure. The Office of Apprenticeship allows us to operate our own system as long as it is closely aligned with the federal expectations. So what you will see in the language in the bill is mostly borrowed from the federal regulations found in 29 CFR 29 and 29 CFR 30. So what you have before you is the most closely aligned statutory language that we could possibly have. We're not going way off the ranch to create a unique system. We don't want to do that. We want to be aligned as aligned as possible.
So I appreciate that. I think the answer to my question about the money is not only do they have the overlay of whether we're in compliance or not, that's another, but in terms of the money that comes to us to administer this program, it's all done in competitive grants.
So this year they changed it. Sorry, that was the second part of the answer that left my brain at that point. But this year, for the first time ever in the history of apprenticeship, the federal government is providing base allocations to states. We still have to submit an application for it, but that's in the ballpark of $400,000.
And what does
We
it
do
current?
get state funds as
And we do
well
get
too.
state
We have state funds that administer the program.
So it's 340. We could, if we can get that from the feds, it's 340 plus state funds. Okay, that just helps. So, but we have to have this. This has to. What I'm trying to understand is the urgency of this and of this work, because at this late point in the game, we have to really feel the fire in our belly about the urgency of it. And this will enable us to then apply for that 340, which until we have this rewrite, we probably are not in shape to do.
We can still apply for it. I don't know where that would put us in terms of the existing grant that we have, where we said we would modernize the legislative language. And then I want to take the risk over into another category and say, as I've been working with businesses to register their programs and update them and modernize them, the majority of our programs are in electrical and plumbing. And what I always get a question about ratios. So why does our the ratio is about the number of journey workers or skilled workers to apprentices, and it's 1-to-1. So if you're a skilled electrician, you can only have one apprentice. That's just the way the statute exists
At the moment, and right now,
and that taking this on would provide some relief to these businesses who want to train more people, who want to be able to expand their business, and they're sort of the 1-to-1 ratio.
Great. Well, that's helpful. So why don't we go for it?
So we are going to do our best to be succinct.
Yeah.
Whereas, we feel that it is a relatively straightforward request because a lot of what we're asking to put in statute is simply enshrining current practice and aligning with federal expectations. With that, it is a lot of language. The bill is currently 52 pages. So I'm not going to sit here and walk through line by line. We will
And
do
we'll
our
have
best.
David.
We will do our best to really just kind of hit the highlights. And so also you have the presentation. Senator Harrison, you're looking through it right now. This was provided by Jay, and it really does give a lot of kind of background and current context to the program.
So where would you like to start?
It's really your pleasure. Do you want to walk through background of apprenticeship, or do you want to get into the language?
You have an hour and 5 minutes, 6 minutes. So you tell me what you'd like, because I think both Randy and I've spent, and to a certain degree in the past, but Randy and I've spent quite a bit of time in this committee doing apprenticeships, but Wendy and Les, I think maybe a combination of the two.
Okay.
But I think we want to end by understanding fully what's coming at us and how quickly we have to move it.
Okay, so I can just provide a quick overview. I won't go through the presentation. All right, so
Is the presentation fairly straightforward?
the presentation is straightforward. I will say there's one slide that has pie charts on it.
Okay, tell us which one we want to look at. Pie charts, these?
Yes.
15.
And slide 15. So this is just the current demographics. We're able to analyze data more easily in this new system that we're in. But you'll notice on the apprentice gender pie chart that the majority of apprentices did not self-identify. This is an indicator to me of employers who haven't gone in and updated their apprentice demographics yet in the new system. But the majority of our apprentices are men. Right, and you can see on the other pie chart that the majority of apprentices are white. And so here, there's a lot of opportunity for us to expand apprenticeships into new sectors and to serve a more diverse population. And what you'll see in this bill is really an expansion of what it is that we're talking about and trying to create systems that will let us provide technical assistance to employers about diversity, equity, accessibility. And so we're trying to focus on that. From a staff capacity perspective, we're no longer processing data. We're going to be shifting to providing technical assistance to employers. So we wanted to frame that out, but it is also defined in 29 CFR 30. So anything that's in this bill that's related to diversity, equity, and inclusion is taken from the federal government and the expectations that they have on us.
That we will meet them. Right.
And the House Commerce Committee, I mean, they did focus a lot on making sure that as we're looking to get this language in statute, clarify the roles of the department as it relates to the apprenticeship program, and then allow us to begin to promote more apprenticeship for workforce development purposes to ensure that as we're doing that, we're driving towards more inclusive apprentices in these programs, and how are we tracking that, et cetera. So
yeah, so so many cultures, most cultures have electricity and plumbing. So this is in many ways a common language for those who are coming here too. It's a great opportunity for people coming and refugees and people who are resettling in the state. So yeah, for all those reasons.
So
right.
At a high level, a registered apprenticeship program is an employer's own training program that they have taken the steps of documenting and registering with the Department of Labor, us. And they can work however they want to, but they have to work within the parameters of the federal system. We can't just have a registered apprenticeship program for any occupation. It has to be apprenticeable is the word that's used. And so they're more technically oriented occupations. The bulk of our apprentices right now are in electrical and plumbing. We also have programs in healthcare and manufacturing. We have the opportunity to expand into cybersecurity. We have the opportunity to expand into weatherization and some of these other areas of interest, including education, right? So it is at the base level, it's a training program where you're hiring someone off the street who doesn't know anything about a particular industry or occupation, giving them the skills and abilities that you need for someone to be a journey worker, or in electricians, master is the terminology. So what we ask the employers to do is to document what their program is about. They have to have a training outline, also known as a work process schedule. They have to provide at least 144 hours of related coursework for each year of the program. The training period can go from 2,000 hours or 1 year up to 5 years, 10,000 hours. Those terms are all defined by the federal government. And in addition to that on-the-job training, the work process schedule, and the related coursework, the gap is filled by mentors, right? So you have someone on the job who knows the job, who is helping the person learn it. Also built into the system is progressive wage increases. So as you gain skill, the company promises to pay you more. All of these things are documented in what we call the standards of apprenticeship. And these are approved by the company. They come to me as the state director for approval, and then we have a program. Then the company can start hiring apprentices into the program. Each apprentice gets their own agreement with the company. The agreement doesn't change the nature of at-will employment in Vermont, but it represents the terms and conditions of being an apprentice with the company. Once the apprentice completes, the company signs off that they've met the requirements for on-the-job training and for coursework. The Department of Labor generates a certificate of completion of registered apprenticeship that is portable. It's a portable credential recognized anywhere in the United States. So it's just proof that they've completed a training program, just like a degree is proof that you've completed an education program. So there's also, I think, a mythology out there about apprenticeship as an alternative path to a four-year degree. Yes, that is true, but also CCV and Vermont Tech operate, or they're sponsors of apprenticeship programs. CCV builds the related instruction around their degree credit-bearing courses. So if you're an apprentice pharmacy technician under CCV, you know that your courses will transition over into a degree path if that's what you want to do. So we're not mutually exclusive. Our system is very diverse and emerging diversity in terms of how it's organized. I'm going to go back to what I said. It's a company's own program. It can also be a sponsor's own program. So CCV can sponsor a program on behalf of multiple employers. The employers agree to the system that they've created. CCV manages all the details of registering apprentices. And so that's a model that we have. Vermont Association for the Education of Young Children is a sponsor of a multi-employer program. So they have childcare centers that have apprentices. The Vermont Rural Water Association is a multi-employer sponsor for water system specialists and wastewater treatment specialists on behalf of municipalities.
That's great.
So those exist.
Those exist.
That's great. Yeah, we really need water and wastewater workers.
And so there's a possibility for these programs to exist across sectors, including the public sector. We have police officers, state troopers, correctional officer programs that exist currently
As apprenticeships?
as apprenticeships.
But just to circle back to the why, one of our biggest concerns is we have this expansion going on and we would like to continue to build on that. We would like to be able to continue to apply for additional funds from the federal government to expand apprenticeship in different sectors. going all the way back to the statute, it's not really clear what the authority we have as a department and what authority do we have to mandate that certain employers comply with certain provisions under the apprenticeship program. And so that's one of the big key pieces, I think, of this legislation. It clearly articulates that the department is the state apprenticeship agency. It clearly articulates a board with membership and duties and responsibilities of advising the department. And then it goes through and clearly articulates what employers or program sponsors must do in order to be registered, and then what they must do with their apprenticeship agreements with their own individual employees.
And to give us the authority to deregister a program. So if we have an approved program and a sponsor is not doing what they've agreed to in their approved standards, right now we don't necessarily have a recourse. This bill provides and articulates what that process is.
And it's also, as Jay was mentioning, I think it's a bill that will allow for protection of people in these areas. As Jay mentioned, and I want to make sure it's emphasized, we're starting to see a lot of entities start to classify things as pre-apprenticeship or youth apprenticeship. And as Jay mentioned, there is no definition of that in current state statute. There is no authority under any governmental entity to regulate those entities. And I'm using regulate kind of loosely there. So it's another key piece for us, is making sure that there is clear understanding of what a pre-apprenticeship program is, what a youth apprenticeship program is, that they need to be registered with the department, just like apprenticeship programs. And so that's something that, like we've run into this, I remember recently we've run into this in the past, where we had somebody reaching out because they were claiming they were in a pre-apprenticeship wastewater program, and the individual was, I can remember the circumstances about the individual, but we're sitting there saying we have no idea what this is. It's not registered with us. There isn't a pre-apprenticeship for this. And that to us was an issue that we think needs to be addressed.
And just for additional context, Hireability, or rehab, has received a grant to kind of expand pre-apprenticeships for individuals with a disability. So we've given them the opportunity to review the definition here and to give us comments on the drafts. So they did that back in December. We included them in the process. We've included the Agency of Education in the process because youth apprenticeships would apply to them. Pre-apprenticeships would apply also not just to our state government partners, but to nonprofits and other entities that are in a position to train people for meeting the entry requirements of an apprenticeship program.
Got it. So you've included some of our partners along the way.
Yes.
Which is great.
So is there funding to the employers who, I'm sorry, I might have missed this. You might have said that before I came in.
We have an existing federal grant that we've sub-granted to CCV and Vermont Tech. So they work with employers, and the grant money that we give them, we've given them to develop new programs. And they can also use the funds to pay for related instruction. So the companies can have people participate.
That helps pay for the coursework, the 140 hours or whatever it is.
But the employers don't get like a direct subsidy, like.
No.
They get the employees.
Right.
They
But we're
hopefully,
also trying to make a lot of that education no charge to folks. I'm just figuring out.
we haven't, we've through in the last 2.5 years, we've created a lot of scholarship
Yeah.
money for everyone to, all parties involved with apprenticeships to take advantage of. But this is for going forward, and there is no money to the actual employer here. This bill, I assume, has no money in it. This is all technical corrections.
Right.
Thank goodness. I mean,
But and changing the board, I'll have a couple of questions about that.
so, yeah. So the big things the bill does. And because we can have David go through it with us, but if you could sort of walk us through the big things that the bill actually does.
So big things, and Jay, we'll tag team this, please feel free to jump in. It has a definitions section. I'm not gonna walk through all the definitions here, but, again, a key piece for us here are these are not currently defined. And so even a definition of what an apprentice is, what a youth apprentice is, pre-apprenticeship, et cetera. I mean,
Yeah, things we're using
statute are
all the
great.
time, but aren't defined in statute. Got it.
And so a lot of these definitions come from the federal regulations. And so you will also see there are some definitions that House Commerce did a lot of work on regarding diversity, equity, inclusion, underserved communities. What do those terms actually mean if we're trying to promote diversity,
Right.
equity, and inclusion in apprenticeship programs? That is one of the tasks of the Department of Labor under the language. They wanted to be clear of what that actually meant. If we're trying to build a system that is going to try to bring in other communities that are not white males, as Jay was kind of mentioning with our stats. So
Yeah, well, it's
a lot
we
of
have a
good
lot of
work
work to do
there.
here.
Anything in the definition section you want to
I
mention?
think that maybe there's three. Advanced standing is defined here. This is the opportunity basically to.
So what, give us if you want to give us a page, and if not, we'll,
Top of page 2.
This is a mechanism that exists for an employer to give someone either credit toward the on-the-job training. Right, so if it's an 8,000 hour term or 4 years, and you apprentice out of state for 1,000 hours, the company can give you advanced standing and recognize that 1,000 hours. The company could also give you advanced standing by recognizing maybe some courses that you had taken before that relate to the program. And so it's creating an accelerated path for people recognizing prior experience. It's a decision the company makes. So that's an important one.
Just a question on that one. Could it be experience from another country? Does it have to be in the? Oh, good.
yeah, because many things are recognized. We've worked with that, particularly with OPR, recognizing out of
Yeah.
country.
But I didn't know if the federal restrictions that you're working under.
Yeah, no, just
Okay.
anything that we can do to create a pathway for people to enter
At a higher level.
application.
Because the classic apprenticeship program for electrical and plumbing is 5 years,
4.
4.
Well, and the plumbers really appreciate their program. That was a
Yes,
question. I had.
as do the electric.
This is compliant and supportive of the existing.
Yeah, so let me speak to that. The Department of Public Safety is the licensing entity for plumbers and electricians. We already have
Division
alignment
of Fire
with
Safety.
Division of Fire Safety, but we have alignment between our programs. So they built into their statute a mechanism that recognizes the apprenticeship as a preparation path for licensure. Someone can't sit for the licensure test if they don't have a certificate of completion or something signing, from a master signing off for
Right.
them to do that.
Great.
So we've got alignment there.
Okay, so definitions. Got,
Great. Come back to that.
you had another definition you wanted to?
Yes, this is the national program standard. So the way the federal government has envisioned this sort of.
On bottom of page, should be bottom of page 5, top of page 6.
Okay,
The way the federal government has positioned this program to expand is for them to approve programs either as national program standards or as national guideline standards. But what that means is there's an entity in the United States that will operate an apprenticeship program for a specific occupation, and they can sign on employers in any state who want to participate in the program and who could have employers participate. So they're providing a capacity that might not exist in a state. Or if we have a really small industry where it doesn't make sense for our own program to exist, a company could sign on at the national level. for the
Great.
program.
That could be great.
that's great, yeah,
And again, these things do not currently exist.
right.
The mechanism is for us to make it happen.
Right. Other definitions?
Those are the two I think that I want to highlight.
So when you get past, and we're just looking at definitions here, right? So when you get past the definitions, you get into the first section, I'll say the first few sections, which are basically establishing the department. So this is, apologies, this is beginning on towards the bottom of page 10.
Yeah, no, this is great. So this is, as we go through this is primarily embedding actual practice and technical correction.
Yes, ma'am.
So that's sort of our overarching work here is putting in statute what is current practice, what hasn't yet been defined in statute, and technical corrections, bringing it up to speed.
Yes.
So you have the section 1112 and 1113. It would establish the Department of Labor as the state apprenticeship agency
Got
in
it.
the state of Vermont.
Which,
This is a little bit of an issue, Jay, correct me if I'm wrong here. There's a little bit of an issue with our federal program. We're a state that operates a state apprenticeship program under the guidelines of the federal government, but the current statute is not very clear that the Department of Labor is the state registered apprenticeship agency. And there's a lot of ambiguity between what the department's role is versus what the apprenticeship council's role is. Another thing that is extremely out of date is the current statute says that the department is the one actually providing the training for these programs, which is in no way case,
Right.
CCV, the other, technical institutions are the ones usually providing the related instruction here. So these sections would just establish the department as the apprenticeship agency and clearly define that. It has some purpose statements here, and requires the department to administer the program. What I will just highlight is maybe the bottom of page 11. So the registered apprenticeship program shall develop, register, monitor, and maintain records of program standards. We are to promote and provide the technical assistance to the employers and sponsors, as Jay was mentioning. Promote diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion, which we talked about. Expand the number of programs, and make some information available to the public. We're going to want to go with this. I think I'm going to go to the report.
Do you want questions as we go along?
Please.
Just, so are there apprenticeship programs happening without the department's work? And multiple questions. Is there anyone doing that work who would oppose this structure? And do you have the capacity to handle additional apprenticeships?
Yeah, so I don't think there's anyone that would oppose this. I think everyone knows that we're the registration agency. It's just the statute doesn't say that.
Okay.
The current statute. We have a federal grant that's funding us to modernize the system. So we've moved out of our old data system that was on our COBOL-based server, and we're using the federal government's registration system now. So
Oh, great. So you're not
everything's-
caught in the
No.
trap of the rest of the department. Yay.
Recently released.
Okay.
So,
Congratulations.
thank you.
yeah,
So
no,
you're
it's-
functional.
Uh,
Sorry, I shouldn't be.
no, that's
Okay.
great.
So it's easier now for a business to register their program. It's all electronic.
Right.
They have the control. They can register their own apprentices. It's
So-
just-
This is all electronic,
that is all electronic.
this substantial, right?
And so if we go to the website, we can just check it out.
Not yet.
Okay.
I have someone working on updating the website this week, but the system is called Rapids,
Okay.
and each company has a login. So you wouldn't be able to see anything anyway because you don't have a login. I could
Okay.
come back at some point.
So
No, that's
maybe
okay.
when we have some
And
time,
I
we
didn't
could
mean
walk
to-
through it together.
But that's really good to know.
Yeah.
So then you do have the capacity
Yes,
to increase to these other
yeah, and
situations.
in our old data system, so I started last March. Before that, our old data system was very data entry heavy, so it required intervention on our staff for every single thing that any employer wanted to do. Our new system, we're still supporting employers getting into the new system. We should be done with that in June, but the burden of entering things is on the business. And that will allow us and the staff in the program to shift to monitoring, technical support, and going out and talking to companies and talking to apprentices.
Great.
One thing I want to highlight though, that is a concern that we have with current language, which is why we're bringing this, which is why we're prioritizing this. As Jay mentioned, I think there's general understanding that the department is the apprenticeship, agency, and I don't know that there's any employers out there trying to operate an apprenticeship program without being registered. But Jay mentioned earlier, if there is an employer or a sponsor that is not in compliance, we essentially have no authority to bring them
Right.
into or force them into compliance.
Right, Jay did mention that, but that's one of the pluses that this bill gives you an opportunity to deauthorize.
The rogue apprentice.
So one thing I want to highlight on the departments, we do have to create, under this language, we would have to create a strategic plan every 5 years for the apprenticeship program. And then on the bottom of page 14, top of page 15, it talks about, so that's the develop and disseminate a strategic plan every 5 years. And then it's prepare and submit to the General Assembly an annual report on the status of the apprenticeship program. And so this would include here on the top of the page, should be the top of page 15.
Strategic planning and reporting.
Yes. We have to, general program statistics, including list of programs by county. The House Commerce Committee actually did a lot of detail on this section to make sure that we were providing information that they thought would be valuable. So they help us a lot expanding what's here. An analysis of apprentices and programs disaggregated by age, race, sex, gender identity, new American status, veteran status, disability, industry, and education status, non-traditional occupations by gender and race, new occupations approved, average starting and ending wages. So there's
Right,
a lot of good work there about what we would have to report back to you all on an annual basis.
right.
Do you
Yeah,
mind? So I liked how on page 10, you included in the types of experiences of folks and backgrounds,
Mhm.
you included former incarceration.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I've heard here, we're kind of transitioning. We had programs in the correctional system that were discontinued and we're trying to work on new programs. I'm not sure how you would do apprenticeship except for correctional officers in those institutions. But so you can speak to that, and I think including previously incarcerated numbers in the data would be good.
Okay. So last September, I had the Office of Apprenticeship come up and do 2 days of training. One day was with Department of Labor staff, one day was with our partner staff, and corrections was there.
Oh, good,
And so they had I saw lots of light bulbs going off for how they
good.
thought they could make this work. I think.
Oh, she does have her hand.
Yeah.
Keep going, keep going. I was just-
Sorry, I hadn't even seen that she had popped up in person. So
That pre-apprenticeship would be the thing that we could work with corrections to create in facilities.
Okay,
which
great.
is key. Great minds thinking alike. I was thinking, wow, these pre-apprenticeships, we could start right in prison. And this is a key piece of work they could be doing, as they still have yet to fully roll out what we enabled for them last year, which is the workforce development,
Yes.
being able to go to different facilities.
And based on the definition of pre-apprenticeship, we would need to have employer partners be involved in the development of that. And then that's where advanced standing definition applies. So when someone exits, they have completed their pre-apprenticeship and they know how many hours are going to be credited to them when they enter an apprenticeship with one of the partnering employers.
Great, and they have a relationship with an employer too, which would be huge.
Which is great,
Yeah.
critically important.
Great.
Keisha.
Yes, hi, I have a similar question and I'm, multitasking here, but so I hope I didn't miss it. But when you mentioned New Americans, I think a lot of thought has to go into cultural translation, how people understand credentialing and what they're going to be able to do when they finish a program, when they're looking at a website. So it's not just translating it into other languages, but culturally translating what people are reading. which often ends up helping people who also speak English. So I'm just wondering, without sort of, I don't know if you have the new DEI person hired or are close on that, but without sort of just putting this on their shoulders, has thought been given to that, and how is that looking?
Yeah, so I'm interested in making sure that whatever we produce as a department on our website is produced in plain language so that it's generally understood by anyone. Our EEO position has been filled. She's onboarded. So I think we recognize that there's still some work to do here. This would be a new area for this program in particular. And in recognition of that, at the end of the bill, we've added a section that would have us report back to you and to the House Commerce Committee after working with the Office of Racial Equity on improvements to the bill for these particular reasons. We recognize the timing. We're trying to acknowledge that we don't know what we don't know right now, and we want to make it better. We're committed to making it better.
Well, and all of this is making it better. Yeah.
And just to piggyback off that, because this conversation actually came up in House Commerce this morning. So as Jay mentioned, there is a report back. We didn't have the opportunity to have the Office of Racial Equity review the bill in its entirety prior to the work in House Commerce. So they have a report back. But they said, we hope that your work with them isn't just on reviewing the language, that you're reviewing the program that you're trying to establish to ensure that you're taking account for things that Madam Chair just brought up. So we assured them that is our goal and our intention to work with them on this.
Terrific.
Just a minor issue as we're going back to page 7. If you look at page 9, line 16, I think there's a big typo there. There's a leading parenthesis.
My guess is this has not been first.
I thought we fixed that. That was
Non-binary.
brought up in a different version, and I thought we fixed it. So thank you, sir. You may know that. So I can let David know. Okay. So just going back
let's
to
keep going.
Yep, so if you go to what should be roughly the bottom of page 15, the top of page 16, and I'm looking at the version that I got this
Yep,
morning. So
Vermont
I think there should be relatively
Apprenticeship
in alignment. But when looking at the board, so again, it's the current statute is not very clear on the role of the council as it relates to advising the department. The apprenticeship council doesn't really have the resource capacity to administer the program. And so that's one thing we're trying to be very clear with our language here, in that the department administers the program and does all the day-to-day work that goes into that. The council is really there to advise the departments on that process. And so we've clearly defined that they're advise the department, sponsors, employers, and others around apprenticeship programs. There was work done regarding the membership of the board.
Is that all here?
What you have is,
We do on page 17 and 18. It looks like we have new board representation
yes,
identified.
so it's currently, I believe the statute is 3 apprentices, 3 program sponsors,
2 representatives from a union.
A member of the State Workforce Development Board.
That's currently not in the statute.
Our employer program sponsors, is that, those are apprentices?
Those are they would be the companies that have the programs registered with us.
Now, everyone's appointed by the governor,
No,
Correct.
almost everyone.
Except
except for the
member
people
from
who are,
the member on the State Workforce Development Board is
appointed by the chair of the
chair
board.
of the State Workforce.
well, okay, almost everyone. Should we have some, I guess, does the legislature do appointments other than, or is it?
Yes, of course they do. The speaker.
Well, I thought maybe we would just have,
Committee on
legislator
committees does
on it.
appointments, speaker does
right,
appointments.
right, but I mean, do we ever have in a statute that the legislature appoints someone other than appointing one of our own?
Yes,
All right, so I just think the legislature should be included.
yeah, the governor's doing a lot of the appointments here. all of them, in fact.
Well, that's
That is,
what I was saying.
that is current statute.
All right,
That
well, it
the
doesn't have to
council
be
is
that way,
appointed.
I don't think.
It does not.
Okay.
And is that one of the things that they haven't decided yet here is two representatives of the underserved communities, and we still have that in blue. Have they decided who's appointing that?
It should have been appointed by the governor and they fixed it this morning.
We will miss you.
To reflect appointed. by the
Good
governor.
luck.
Thank you.
So it should have, you mean you would propose that?
We
That's
proposed
new,
it
so.
to the House and they included it as appointed by the governor.
So this has been voted on by the House, is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
There's a slightly different version because they reviewed draft 2.1 this morning. And so I sent that to Scott first thing before we started. So you should have it or have access to it, but they did vote out a version. And the House Commerce, and it includes the two representatives. It actually says from underserved communities instead of underserved communities.
And then it will also
And
say
then it
by the
says
governor.
appointed by the governor.
Okay. Great, let's keep
Okay,
this.
so yeah, the board, we tried to keep it to 11 members. We have the commissioner, the director, the secretary of education or designee. AOE was asked that they remain on the board. And then as you see here, we tried to keep it relatively consistent with what's there with the council, but there are a few tweaks. Member from the State Workforce Development Board is added. And then I believe they upped the union representation. And then instead of, it used to be 2 members of the public. And we instead changed that to 2 representatives from underserved communities. Again, to ensure that as we're developing this and moving it forward, we're requiring that there be some diverse perspective on that.
Wasn't there a member from?
Yes, 1 representative of related instruction or training from an adult or secondary career technical education.
Is 1 member enough? That seems like,
Yeah, that seems like the obvious people to have.
I mean,
Well, from what I know of them,
yeah,
formerly the state CTE director, they have lots of obligations. And so the department's my thinking about having adult CTE be present is that there is a lot of opportunity within adult CTE to provide related instruction. They would get tuition money from companies who are paying for this. So the issue is getting everyone to understand what it is we're talking about. And if we can have someone represent adult CTE and go back to their organization and say, this is a space for us, then that role of having 1 representative from them go back to their organization, I think fills that need.
oh, yes, I didn't say the question right. I totally agree there should be somebody. I think, I was wondering if you would want more than 1 representative from that group.
The thing we don't want as a department is for the board to become
Too big,
unwieldy.
right?
How many is it now? I haven't added them.
They said 11.
Is it 11?
And so there was discussion among the House Commerce Committee members about, how to tweak the representation to make it, to try to make it as balanced as possible. I don't think it's something we're necessarily wed to as a department. We obviously want someone from CTE or with related instruction to represent that perspective on the board, as far as whether it's 1 or 2. Again, our concern would just be if we start to increase the number. We don't want a state workforce development board, with 40 plus members. So,
Right. Okay, let's
okay.
give it,
Yep. Okay, so, you have the duties of the board here. This is gonna be the bottom of page, should be roughly around 17 or 18. Again, I'm in the
18,
I'm working on a
bottom of
different
18.
draft, right? So, just to run through those real quick, so
The duties are
chance to
top
look
of
at them.
page 19, what we have.
So they will receive and review reports from the department regarding provisional and registered apprenticeship programs, including programs under development. The House Commerce Committee, what I don't think is in your draft that you're looking at on page, added and program deregistration proceedings. So they wanted the board to be aware if the department is moving forward with some sort of deregistration process. So that was included. They advise the department of the creation of new apprenticeship occupations, advise the commissioner on requests for ratio variances, and advise the department on policies and procedures developed by the department. provide technical guidance for identifying and promoting best practices, and create and convene working groups that are tasked with specific activities related to improving quality, safety, diversity, and alignment.
Great.
So the rest of that section I think is pretty straightforward. That the House asked to add in that they have the administrative, technical, and legal assistance to the department. So then you get to program registration and operation. So
Page 20,
the next,
115.
the next few sections here, I believe, are pretty well in alignment with what the federal government has in their regulations and what they expect us to do in administering a program. So this section here, the highlight is it's simply stating that in order to operate a program, and the program sponsor has to be registered with the department. Here's what must be within a registration, and the process by which they can register. Anything you want to highlight in this
Just
section?
that it also articulates that we are going to, we call it vet the business to make sure they're compliant with tax law, with workers' compensation program, with the UI, and register with the Secretary of State's office. We don't, we want companies to be compliant with our sister agency rules, and we expect that they would resolve those issues before we move forward with registering our programs.
Would you actually go to the companies?
Not initially, we register the program,
Yeah.
and then after the first year, we visit and check in about
Good,
how the program.
good, just to make sure it's not a sweat shop.
Yes.
So the other thing here, it allows for a provisional approval, and then it requires that there be ongoing reviews every 5 years of those registered apprenticeship programs in order to maintain their ongoing registration.
I bet that's new. Is that
That
new?
is new.
Yeah, that's great.
And it-
Where's that?
So if you're looking on the subsection D of that page, or of that section, it's titled Review, Provisional, and Permanent.
Page 22.
Oh, the little d.
And so, it requires that shall be given a provisional registration for a period of a year. After initial provisional registration certificate shall be issued by the director. We review them for quality and conformity. And then when you get to the next sub E, ongoing review, the department shall conduct subsequent reviews every registered apprenticeship program every 5 years.
Got it. Yeah, great.
So then just the union participation piece is basically to say, to state that, if there is a union involved or some sort of collective bargaining agreement involved, there has to be sign off by that union or collective bargaining entity for the registered apprenticeship to move forward. And throughout the bill, we comment that, apprenticeship agreements or apprenticeship standards have to be in alignment with their collective bargaining agreements if they have them.
Obviously. There isn't a section called, is this under program operating? Where is this?
The
union
union piece, it's there, the sub
Bargaining
F
agreement.
under that
I see
section.
union agreement. It's F, top of page 24. Okay, thanks. And then that takes us down through program operation.
So we also have in here that the apprenticeship programs have to notify us if there are changes, both in the program itself and the methods and procedures they're using to provide instruction or the work process schedule that Jay was mentioning earlier. They also have to notify us if their registered apprentices are suspended, canceled, reinstated, etc. So there's a little bit of a requirement to notify us in the event that there are changes to programs.
Are we losing you?
You still have Keisha, still have a quorum.
Okay, oh, right.
You got quorum.
He says. Keisha's saving your bacon here. Okay, great.
Okay. so-
Thanks, Keisha, for being here.
the next section is ratios. Not sure. I am on page 25. It may be a few pages down.
Yeah,
Yep, on
it's-
page 26. It's the
Yeah.
bottom of the
So
page.
this is, I think, another key piece that Jay mentioned at the beginning.
Yes.
And so currently, right now, there is a requirement of 1-to-1 just period and stop. There is no adjustment. And so, Senator Harrison, when you were asking about whether sponsors would be supportive of this, one thing that we've seen is that especially in the electrical and plumbing, there's a request to allow for a different ratio. And so what you have in this section is it keeps the ratio must be from apprentices to journey workers shall be 1-to-1. However, we allow for each apprentice who completes 2,000 hours of on-the-job training, the ratio may increase 1-to-2. And then from there, an employer or a sponsor can request that the department give an additional ratio above the 1-to-2. So whether it's 1-to-3, 1-to-4, etc. But that we department would need to ensure the safety of the apprentices, ensure that there's no, decrease in the quality of the on-the-job training that they're receiving. We have to get advice from the board, advice from BOSHA to make sure there's no, again, safety concerns. But then the commissioner can approve a higher variance from there.
Right.
Okay, great,
And
good.
That's dependent also on the capacity of the employer to make a higher ratio work. We
Sure.
wouldn't just approve it across the board for any employer in an industry. It's gotta be employer specific.
And then you probably go out and look at it.
Yes.
Right.
So the only other thing I'll highlight in this section, we did some work in the House Commerce Committee. This is towards the end of that section, so maybe on page 28 for you.
Yeah.
I believe it's here in this
29.
language. Yep. They asked that, if there is a period of emergency.
Yeah, that's 5A.
If declared by the governor, we can approve, the commissioner may approve a higher ratio for just kind of give a blanket variance to address any emergency period. And that any blanket variance under that period of emergency would expire once the period of emergency went out.
Okay. Right.
Okay, so next section is standards of apprenticeship. So this is where we just clearly articulate.
Wait a minute,
that-
before we get to that, did we settle this language in blue with the House?
Yes, it was, those were recommendations as I was working with David Hall, your lead counsel, on language to make sure it fit correctly. He was proposing the blue and we have tweaked it. So now it says, when the period of emergency expires, any ratio variance is approved by the commissioner under this subdivision, as opposed to under the subsection, so the
Got it.
blue language, shall terminate, and it just says the sponsor as opposed to employer or program, because sponsor has a definition. So it says the sponsor, because the sponsor could be the employer, could be someone else. The sponsor shall comply with the requirements of the section governing ratios. So it was all
Perfect. Okay, great.
language proposed by
It
David.
is just.
Yep.
Okay, so next we're to standards of apprenticeship.
So this is where we articulate that in order to be an apprenticeship program, here are the standards that the employer or program sponsor must comply with. They have to be in writing. It goes through an extensive list of things that must be included.
And the other attachment that you have, the packet there,
Yes, this,
Uh-huh.
is the
Right.
example.
Okay, great.
right, and all online.
And you're not using this yet because you don't have,
No, we're
you
using-
are using it? Okay, great.
So it has to
Just want to make
have
it legal.
the term and what we say modality of the program. So is this a time-based approach? Is this a competency-based approach? Is it a hybrid? If it is one of those three, here's what it must include. It has to include a work process schedule that Jay was mentioning earlier. So an outline of the work in which the apprentice is going to be doing, the work experience, the related technical instruction requirements, the wage schedule. So what is the employee going to be making as a wage schedule? And it actually requires that it cannot be less than minimum wage or 50% of the journey worker rate, whichever is higher. So trying to ensure that people that are coming in, there's appropriate check on what their wages will be. So employers can't just come in and hire apprentices to be cheap labor. So there has to be, again, a ratio of what the apprentice will make to what the journey worker rate is. Fringe benefits, so it has to outline what the fringe benefits are. It requires that apprentices receive the same fringe benefits that other employees receive, and we have a definition of what that is up in the definition section. It has to identify how the individual is going to be evaluated and the schedule of evaluation, the ratios, if there's a probationary period, what that probationary period is. Has some limitations on how long that probationary period is. Again, this is our goals of ensuring that apprentices is an occupation where people are learning on the job and increasing and moving up, and it's not something where employers can just hire cheap labor. There's a lot of history there about why apprentices started in that sense, and Jay's got a lot of information on that.
The probationary period, we had a lot of discussion in the House about the probationary period, that an apprenticeship program probationary period would necessarily be different perhaps than an employer's regular probationary period. This probationary period talks about the period of training. And so it's going to be a different amount of time than an employer's regular probationary period. So we can't make them be aligned.
Mirrored.
Yeah.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Equipment, facilities, minimum qualifications, placements, registration cards. It's the cards that are provided by the department to identify someone as an apprentice.
Yep, and that's necessary for certain occupations and industries, like for utilities, people going to work out of state. Some states want to see that you're registered as an apprentice, so that card is.
Sorry, where do you,
That
where's,
should be a sub 13.
okay, that's okay. So you're moving way, okay, so.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't want to.
No, it's just
No,
registration
you're all
card.
right.
So
I was-
just, again, these are the things that are must be within the standards, so advanced
all-
standing,
All of this currently is not yet fully articulated in statute.
none of this exists.
None of this exists in statute.
None of this exists in statute. It's implemented through the rules of the State Apprenticeship Council, which is not where we think they should live.
Where it needs to be. Okay, got it. So registration cards.
So then, advanced standing, transfer, so if an apprentice is transferring, it has to, either within or out, the apprenticeship program needs to have standards about that process. The qualified training personnel, the completion, so what does successful completion of the program look like? Interim and stackable credentials. You want to speak to this real quick?
Yeah, so some programs can be built around credentials. As a measure, like halfway through, we're building in the NCCER credential in a construction program. And so we want the company to tell us what credentials an apprentice would expect to get along the way as part of the program before they complete. And that also helps with transfers between programs, because you can see where someone is in the program based on the credentials that they have.
Yeah, and it
Right.
helps people want to do it too.
Well, and it helps if they have to be interrupted in some capacity. They may have completed a piece of it, and that goes back to your earlier thing about being able to show that you've done something and getting credit for it. Okay, great.
So moving along, I'm on the sub 20 here, so program modifications, the provision of registering apprentices, cancellation, so authority to cancel the apprenticeship agreement during the probationary period by either party. And then we get into, I think a key piece here, the equal employment opportunity. You'll see this a little bit further when we get into the apprenticeship agreement. The House Commerce Committee wanted to do a lot of work about ensuring that there's clear articulation and protection to individuals coming into these programs. So they did a lot of work around making sure that incarcerated individuals is listed on that statement. That,
Critical.
so we'll get there here quickly.
No, that's,
Contact information and then record keeping. So again, these are the standards that we have to review and sign off when they try to register as an apprenticeship program, and they have to document all of those different things to us. So then in the next section, section 1118, apprenticeship program, minimum enrollment and evaluation. So this is where we identify that in order to maintain a registered apprenticeship program, you need to have at least one apprentice. But then there's the making sure that there's a distinction between the date it's registered and when they start someone, and then the date that someone completes, and then they get another apprentice. So there are periods in which they may not have an apprentice, but as a general matter, you need an apprentice to continue to be registered. And then this is here, the sub B is where we get into the evaluation. So this allows us, the department, as we mentioned, to go in every 5 years, look at a quality assurance assessment, look at the equal employment opportunity compliance reviews, and also to look at their completion rates. And so if we have a registered apprenticeship program that is not completing their apprentices, we can look at that, compare it to national averages, other employers in the state, et cetera. And if there's, something off there, I'll just leave it at that, then it allows us the opportunity to review it at that point. Why is that the case?
Yeah, and then we now have an opportunity for you to deauthorize programs.
If we get to that.
So, yeah, sadly.
Okay, so I know we have like 13 minutes, 15 minutes. So just next section, we have
13.
Apprentices registered in the agreement. So again, this is where we have the registration process. We have the section that outlines what the apprenticeship program has to include in their standards. Now, this is the section that governs what do you, apprenticeship program sponsor, have to include in your agreement with the individual apprentice. I didn't know this, Jay's pointed out, I've learned, an apprenticeship is an agreement between the apprentice and the program sponsor. And so it is in some sense like a contract in that
So
sense.
it's a contract with the employer.
Right.
And with you too? Do they have
The director has to sign off on them.
so they're sort of,
And there's requirements in the agreement that it has to identify the department as a registered apprenticeship agency and give us their contact information. So,
And the agreements are, not that you don't think they're necessary, but they're necessary based on the history of the program and how people have been taken advantage of as apprentices throughout the history of apprenticeship.
Oh, yeah, well, that's like hundreds of years.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so this just articulates every single thing that is a part of the program. So the apprentice knows what to expect from the employer.
so the thing I want to highlight here, I'm not going to go through every one of these, but there's an extensive list of things that must be within the agreement itself. But if you go to the sub 10 here, which for me is page 38, bottom of 38, maybe 30.
Page 40.
39, 40 for you. So if you go to the sub 10, so again, this is the House Commerce Committee did a lot of discussion on this piece. The agreement has to include a statement that the apprentice will be afforded equal opportunity in all phases of apprenticeship, employment, and training without discrimination because of race, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, place of birth, crime victim status, genetic information, age, qualified disability, incarceration history. and any other
Status.
categories.
Besides status in ours. Does it
Oh,
say
we
history on
changed it to
yours?
history, yes.
That's a good idea.
And this language, for the most part, is borrowed from the bill that came out of this committee for people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So we did a lot
102,
of work on
maybe?
103.
102 and 103.
Or
And
I
so
think it
we
was
tried to mirror that. Thank you for pointing that out, Jim. Okay, so name, address, telephone number, email.
Yep.
So
And an example of an apprenticeship agreement is in that packet, the packet.
yeah,
In this one, right? Yeah. Yeah, no, it's good.
So the next section, deregistration. So what this does is it outlines that the Vermont Registered Apprenticeship Program may cancel the registration. Let me back up. A program sponsor can cancel their registration and notify us on their own accord. It talks about in that event what must be done by the program sponsor to inform any apprentices in the program about what their rights are, how can they transfer to another program, that they have to notify them of our ability to help them transfer, etc.
That's good.
So that's what's in the sub B there. If you look at deregistration at the request of the sponsor and what their program sponsor's obligations are primarily to their apprentices. When you get to the subsection C, which for me is on 41, I'm assuming maybe 42, 43 for you on the draft you
43.
have.
So have we now moved
To
to
deregister.
deregistration? We're now
correct.
120, 1120, 1120,
Correct.
and we're in top of page 43 in little c.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, right.
So this is where the Vermont Department of Labor, the Registered Apprenticeship Program, could deregister, and it just goes through what the process of this would look like. So they may be undertaken when the apprenticeship program is not conducted, operated, or administered in accordance with the program's registered provisions or with the requirements of this chapter. So either they're not complying with the requirements of the chapter, or they're not complying with the requirements of their agreement. So we just, highlighted some that we think are probably most likely to occur: failure to provide on-the-job learning, failure to provide related technical instruction, failure to pay the apprentice a progressively increasing schedule of wages consistent with their skills, persistent and significant failure of the program to operate or perform successfully. Again, these are things put in place to help protect the apprentices themselves. We have here, for purposes of the section, persistent and significant failure performed successfully occurs when a program sponsor consistently fails to register at least one apprentice. It shows a pattern of poor quality assessment results over a period of several years. So we talked about a second ago, if they continue to fail to graduate their apprentices. Low completion rate, no indication of improvement. And so what happens is when we become aware of this, we send them a notice. It must be sent the registered or certified mail, state the shortcomings and the remedy required, and state that the determination of reasonable cause for deregistration will be made unless corrective action is effected within 30 business days. The program sponsor can request an additional 30 business days, and we can provide that. And then if the required correction is not completed, either within the 30 or the 60, the department will send them a notice by registered or certified mail stating the following, and then list the things that we have to identify, including calling out the deficiencies, the remedial measures that we requested, the dates of the communication back and forth based on the stated deficiencies and failure to remedy them. A determination has been made that there's reasonable cause to deregister the program. And then it requires at that point in time that the program has to notify their apprentices. Similarly, if they cancel it voluntarily, what the requirements are to provide information to their apprentices and what their rights are at that point in time.
And there's probably, we can't change anything at this point, right? Where it's too late, but we
I
don't
think at
have
this
to
point we
have
need
it in
to concur.
statute. But I think you should require them, if this happens, to have a posting in the place of business, the way that there's another requirement elsewhere where they have to post information. They should have to post this.
And we can do some of
That
that.
they've been deregistered.
Yeah, totally.
We can do some of that via rulemaking
Yeah.
as well. Okay, so
Good catch.
limitation, well, and the last piece there under the deregistration, it says reinstatement. There is an opportunity for programs to be reinstated if they've demonstrated that they've complied with remedial requests. So limitations, here's where we just say, nothing in this chapter changes at will employment, nothing in this chapter changes collective bargaining agreements, etc. There's a process here for complaints. I'll be very brief on this one. It's just basically if an apprentice, can't resolve an issue locally between them and their program sponsor, or, they can reach out to the department notifying us of the complaint. We will investigate and issue a determination. Sometimes that determination is simply going to be, we may not be the avenue that you need to reach out to when you need to reach out to the Civil Rights Center, or
Right.
something of that nature. So, and then the last two sections are pre-apprenticeship programs and youth apprenticeship programs. And so this would just simply calls them out as distinct training programs, I'll call. And then just says that they need to be registered with the department and what they need to do. Similarly with an apprenticeship program, what their requirements are when they do register. These sections are a lot more lightweight than what's required of an actual apprenticeship program, you know, trying to recognize the need for these, the growing industry here, and that, you know, we just want to make sure they're meeting some minimum requirements when it comes to that. So for pre-apprenticeship, for example, it needs to identify what occupation in an apprenticeship is it aligned with. You can't call it a pre-apprenticeship if it doesn't actually align with someone going into an apprenticeship. So that's one of the requirements that we have there. The last thing that you want to jump in?
Well, just that the pre-apprenticeship really is a model that can be for any population or group of people. So you could imagine a pre-apprenticeship for women who are interested in becoming police officers. That helps them understand and be prepared for the physical requirements of an assessment for a police officer. That's one example. A pre-apprenticeship in the prison system to get someone ready for entry requirements in a program when they exit.
Would a pre-apprenticeship be applied with something like the Serve, Earn, Learn program?
Possibly, if we're getting people
Younger
occupationally
people,
ready
yeah.
for entry into an occupation.
Yeah. Okay, great.
The last thing that is not on your
Career pathway alignment.
that is in there, and that is just, you want to speak to this section?
Yeah, so there's still work to be done with the Agency of Education and Higher Ability and some of our other state partners to kind of develop what this program looks like and how it works. So we couldn't prescribe in the bill what it would look like exactly, but this is we want a little bit of time to go and work.
So this is just charging you to continue that one. So, well, we'd have nothing to do if you did all the work in this bill. We'd have nothing left to do.
The last thing that is not in there, because it was just added in the draft this morning, is just the report that we commented on earlier, us working with the Office of Racial Equity to review the language in the bill, review things that we can do to ensure.
Are you hoping to do that in the next day or two so that when this is formally out of the House and to us, we'll have that?
That report requirement is in the bill that came out of the
That
House,
report requirement
and
is,
it is a report back to you
Okay.
by January 15th of 2024.
from the Office of Racial Equity.
Our collaboration with them.
Report back is due, is
Okay.
January 15th of 2024.
shock me further. Great,
Two things.
yeah.
I expect you're gonna work with the development corporations and just Brattleboro, BACC is really good at this.
Yes.
So
So
And
and I'm sure others are too.
and Adam is the chair of our state workforce development.
I knew he was on the board. Good. I'm glad he's the chair.
yeah, so somewhere in the bill, it talks about that we would work with local and regional entities in workforce development on expanding
Good,
the
because
program.
obviously they're on the ground. They know what to do.
The
And
those
then-
have changed the House made. We had said, I think we anticipated working with locals, but they specifically called it out in the bill that we charge as a department with working with state and
Great.
local education workforce partners. So
Great.
they wanted to make sure that as well.
And then the other thing is, do you have a goal of how many new either agencies that have apprentice, whatever, and how many apprentices you want? I mean, do you have an overall goal, and maybe that'll be part of the strategic
That would be
plan?
part of the strategic.
But that would be really good, I think, if you had that.
We have, I don't know if you have your high level numbers, but we did see a 200 increase in the number of apprentices over the past 2 years.
We had a big increase in the last 2 years.
Oh,
Yeah,
good.
so
Yeah,
we've been working to get into this new system, and as such, we're working with every employer and helping them get apprentices registered that weren't registered before. And so I think by June, we'll have a good sense of what the state of the state is, and then can work from there to say, our goal is to have this many new apprentices, this many new occupations, this many new employers in this expanding into the education sector at least
Great,
next year.
great, thank you.
Yeah, but it would, if you'd be kind enough to get us that number, because I know it's grown significantly. We touched on it briefly with the workforce development bill.
This morning, I just checked before we came in here, and we had 1,341 apprentices registered in the current year, which is the federal fiscal year, October 1st to November.
To September.
30th. So we still.
So we at the moment have 1,341 apprentices registered.
Yes. And Vermont Tech.
And how
is
many different occupations?
33,
And how many sponsors?
150.
Cool, thanks.
No, that's good. All of this is.
All over the state?
Yeah,
Great.
Except in Grand Isle County and Essex County. Those are the two areas where we don't have
Okay,
sponsors.
we'll let the people know.
well, we work with one of them in the afternoon.
Yeah, and we have another one here.
And I will say.
Well, actually, that's
No.
Dick Massett.
Franklin, I was thinking.
That's helpful. Thank you. And at our peak, what has been our sort of standard number of apprenticeships in the past? Because this is a growth, I think. This is a
Yeah,
big
this is a
number.
growth. I don't know the answer to
Okay,
that one off the top of my.
okay.
I can't find them all.
And I think we're gonna wrap up now. This is a great prep for us because the bill is gonna come to us formally in the next few days. We're gonna need to speed it along. We're delighted to know what a top priority it is. And I think we can go off live and thank everybody